Welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops and Detroit Bad Boys, a former D1 hooper and high school coach, current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sanko for the second Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
Omari, what day is it?
Monday.
Monday. Omari was texting me before the episode, and he was writing an article on Eugene Omoruyi, who we will talk about later in the episode. And he's like, guys, I just put Tuesday. It's Monday. I was like, Omari, you don't surprise us with this. We know you never know what day of the week it is.
So when I was leaving the game Saturday night, like it was all these cars outside the arena. And like most games are out on the weekends. So I'm like, why is it so busy tonight? What's going on? And it's like, oh, Saturday night, there's traffic from people going out and about and whatever. Especially this time of year, the days just blend together. It's just the slow march toward the off season, and then we could get into the broader picture stuff that I know people are clamoring for. And, today we'll actually get into some of that. So I'll bounce it back to you, Bryce, and let you welcome in our very special guest.
Yeah, man, we have a great one, a big friend of the podcast, a good friend of mine I've got to know over the last year or so. He's done a ton for me that I can't even explain all of it, but he is also a very busy man. So we're going to bring on Matt Babcock. I'm going to introduce one thing. He has the Matt Babcock Show brought to you by Tidal League. So that is his podcast. Absolutely something you should check out. He goes through his history, his life as a basketball person, his basketball family, all of that. But Matt, first, welcome back to the Pistons Pulse, and let everybody know all of the big things you got going on with your world.
Hey, first of all, thanks, guys, for having me back. It's always a pleasure to connect with you guys. And, just introduce some of the stuff I've got going on. Like you said, I've got the Matt Babcock Show, which, Tidal League's really done a great job of helping me get that off the ground. And we're looking to scale it out. I was doing just a number of just solo podcasts, kind of sharing stories and lessons of working and growing up in basketball. But we're starting to travel and do some in-person interviews. I was in Atlanta recently with the Thompson twins. We're going to be releasing that episode, I believe, this Wednesday. Just kind of kicking that off. I think we're going to do some stuff at McDonald's All-American game in Houston as well. But yeah, then I'm also, working with you and your guys now at Draft Digest, which is a Sports Illustrated channel on the Fan Nation Network. And kind of brought some of my guys with me too, former NBA scouts, Doc Martin, Jason Felipe, and then my longtime right-hand man, Derek Murray. So we created a bunch of premium draft content for Draft Digest and Sports Illustrated, my mock draft, my rankings, various analysis, scout reports and whatnot. That also, Derek and I are working together on Cerebro Sports, analytics company, and they got financial backing from Mark Cuban among other investors. And Derek influenced the company to scale out and add a traditional scouting element, which I'm leading the NBA draft part of it. And that's the gist of what I'm doing, and all basketball. And as usual, life is good.
What is Cerebro Sports, Matt, for our listeners? I'm familiar with it. I've got to utilize it, just because there's a little bit of a connection with Draft Digest. Over at Draft Digest, we use it, kind of have a little bit of a partnership with Cerebro. But for our listeners, what did it start out as? And then kind of, you talked about how Derek's trying to scale it out. So what was it? And then kind of what is it growing into now?
Yeah, so it's a relatively new company. I think it's only been around for a year or so, and it started off as an analytics company. Think of Moneyball. And so it's pretty much the way they sold it to me when I first met Ryan Gerardo, the owner and founder, is that they're really trying to create a comprehensive scouting tool for basketball people to use. Not necessarily have it be the end all be all, but just something that could be reliable. And one thing they've done a great job at recently is they've aggregated the most data from high school games, whether it be actual high school games or AAU, EYBL, whatnot. And so they've got data on these kids, extensive data, much more so than I think anywhere else has ever done. Like, for example, Grady Dick's a hot name this year for the draft, right? And he's a 6'8" shooter from Kansas. So instead of looking at him and looking at the metrics from 30 games at Kansas or, whatever amount of games it would be, there's like 100 plus games all the way going back from him being a freshman, sophomore in high school. And so now that those are some, even just looking at the cumulative shooting metrics, field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, free throw percentage, we're able to look at a higher volume. And so it just kind of would give me a little more trust in my ability to evaluate a shooter, just using my eye test. And so anyway, Derek's added, the traditional scouting element. And, we have got NBA teams as clients, college teams as clients. And we're providing, sort of old school traditional scouting, but also our ability to gather background information and intel on these prospects.
One, just everything about Cerebro, and I've kind of heard about that, through Bryce. Sounds amazing, and you've been on this show before. It's funny. I bet you at Summer League a few years ago, and even talked to you for a couple draft stories, like during the year after the pandemic, like 21. I think we met probably a little bit before that. So it's just great to kind of do me and Bryce individually, and now we kind of bring you on, and we got some fun stuff coming up, today and beyond. One thing about the draft that we wanted to dive into is that we understand you have a connection with Overtime Elite, and one thing that's sort of shaping a lot of people's draft boards is figuring out the level of competition and how you figure out how to exactly weigh the talent of the Thompson twins, Ausar and Amen. I guess can you kind of talk to us about Overtime Elite and your connection and how that's grown over the last year or two?
First of all, I worked for Overtime Elite. I was there 6 months. I was a scouting advisor. I was there for 6 months prior to them publicly launching. And so I was there at the first steps of it getting off the ground and, help kind of put together the scouting staff and sort of identify the first group of players, including the Thompson twins. So I've been there from the ground, kind of helped to build from the ground up. I stepped away when they started signing players, with my involvement doing so many different things in the basketball space. Our scouting staff kind of turned into a recruiting staff, and I just felt it was kind of a conflict of interest for me if I wanted to stay in the media and be an NBA draft. So I walked away, but I've maintained strong relationships with everybody there, and the whole model has changed quite a bit. When we first started there, it was just going to be, high school aged players, not guys in their pre-draft. And it quickly changed. I mean, they signed John Montero, who was draft eligible last year. And one big issue that I expressed to everybody, including the two owners, Dan Porter and Zach, is that, with kids having to compromise their or sacrifice their college eligibility, it was going to be hard to sign 25, 30 players a year and have all these kids find success professionally. Because it's one thing for the guys like the Thompson twins who are probable lottery picks, but what about these kids that don't have a path to play in the NBA? Where does an 18-year-old go that's not an NBA player? Where does he play? I mean, the G League, that's a tough task for an 18-year-old going overseas. I'm not sure professional teams in Europe or elsewhere would have that much interest in guys like that. And so luckily they were able to find a loophole to sign kids essentially on like a scholarship type deal and pay them through NIL, where they're able to preserve their college eligibility, which has been a total game changer, because now all of a sudden, it's really become more of an academy where these kids are able to utilize like high-level resources and facilities, make some money legally, but also keep their optionality. And so, sorry, I got a little long-winded there, but that's sort of the Overtime Elite in a nutshell.
No, it's perfect. That's why we bring guests on to be long-winded, Matt. Like this is me and Omari. We're going to shut up and we're going to let you cook and do your thing because you're the expert that we're talking to today. You brought up the facilities though, and I know this is coming out, so you can't give away everything, but can you give our listeners just a little bit of a sneak peek into what those facilities are in Atlanta? What are these kids working with in terms of gyms, weight rooms? Where do they stay? Like, I don't know if you got a chance to see where they sleep and live and eat and all of those different aspects.
Yeah, no, and I was, like I said, I was a part of the staff from the beginning before they even decided to have it in Atlanta, and so I really saw it unfold, and we would have kind of company Zoom calls where they're giving us sneak previews and all that, and Tim Cott was the guy that kind of spearheaded the development of the building and dealt with the city and whatnot, and just built an incredible NBA level facility. So you've got an arena that's very aesthetically pleasing. I mean, the whole model is built for media content. That's how they monetize the whole league and the whole operation. It's all based off content and sponsorship and advertising, similar to the NBA. And they just did a big deal with Amazon, and all those games are streamed through Amazon, which is a lucrative deal. So the actual arena part of it that the formal games are played in, there's lights, there's smoke machines, there's an MC. It's somewhat it's a show. And but that's how they monetize, and that's how they could justify, having spent so much money on the facility as a whole. Which there's a whole other area of the arena that's the practice facility, and this thing is off the hook. I mean, it's nicer than most NBA's practice facilities, and I mean, it's got multiple floors. And they've got top-notch weight rooms, training table, built-in restaurant, film rooms. That they, education's a big part of Overtime Elite as well. Dan Porter, the owner of Overtime and Overtime Elite, he was president of Teach for America. So education is a big part of his background, and he made a huge emphasis on these kids getting proper education, even though it's unorthodox. They've really just put a lot into these guys having all of these high level resources for development all the way around. And I guess sort of the give and take there is they do need to make the games kind of a show and somewhat of a circus, if you will. It's got a little bit of the Rucker Park type feel with the MC and whatnot, but that's how they keep the lights on in this beautiful facility.
Matt, when you look at the talent that Overtime Elite's been able to recruit, I guess, how does that position the Thompson twins going into this draft? Right now, they're both sort of in that top 10 sphere, with Amen being pretty popular at 4 or 5. You look at the rosters and you see a lot of highly recruited players. Some of them are as young as 15. The Thompson twins being 20 years old or on the higher end of that. I guess, how do you sort of weigh what they've been able to do this season against the competition and maybe any concerns that evaluators have there?
Competition has been somewhat of a struggle with Overtime Elite from the very beginning. I mean, they've made steps of getting other schools involved. I mean, Hillcrest Prep, out of Phoenix is one example. They got them into the league this year. There was a number of other schools, and so the competition has increased. But I think if there's any criticism of the program as a whole, it's probably that. From a scouting perspective, I mean, my approach is, even though we've got all these freelance scouts and NBA draft analysts on Twitter and whatnot, the people that are actually going to be making decisions are professionals. I mean, these are NBA level general managers and scouts. And for me, I like to think that I'm on an NBA level as far as my experience goes. And I'm able to go into a building like Overtime Elite and get a lot out of it. And so I feel like I've got a great grip, of these players. And, one thing in some ways I have, and not just me, I think people, other people in my role with different outlets, Overtime Elite is very welcoming and accommodating. They give us access to the players. We get to know them personally, and we sit right on the floor and watch these kids. And I think it's a great opportunity to watch these kids as they develop. And what's nice is most of these kids are there for a couple of years too. So I mean, we've got a pretty large sample size by the time they're draft eligible.
What about the coaching and the training that they're getting there, Matt? I'm sure you probably know some of these guys personally, at least the names. I don't know that we have to compare it to necessarily the G League, which I do want to bring that back up. That was something you mentioned the last time you were on with us. But let's start with just the OT. Just the coaching? Do they have specific trainers who are working on their individual skills? Like, how high level is that? How intensive and intricate is that for them in that program?
The lead guy is Kevin Ollie, former NBA, I think played in the NBA for 13 years. I mean, just a pro's pro. He was the head coach at UConn, and they won a national championship with him. And so, if you're comparing this to kids going to the G League or going to school, I mean, they're getting top-notch coaching. And, I think one big difference, I mean, you're asking the comparison with the G League Ignite. I think, it's really different in the sense that Overtime Elite is much more like an academy. I mean, there's multiple teams. There's a lot of players. There's a lot of coaches. There's a huge support staff. G League Ignite, even though it's part of the G League as a whole, it is a team. And I think with that, there's pros and cons, both ways. I mean, G League Ignite is much more of an intimate situation, like your traditional team, whereas I think Overtime Elite, I mean, really comparing it to like a Montverde Academy or an IMG, where they've got multiple teams, they've got a lot behind it. But the long story short, the coaching level is very high. I mean, they've got a lot. They've got a large staff, support staff, and so them owning the building, really using it just for their players and their teams. These kids have access to get on the floor with high level developmental coaches pretty much at any time. And so I really like the back end part of Overtime Elite, of the resources, the facilities, the support staff, just from a developmental standpoint. I think at this stage, these guys' careers, development is everything. Whether it be learning the game from a guy like Kevin Ollie, whether it be pick and roll coverage of how things work in the NBA, or just being able to get on the floor and getting reps, or getting into the weight room whenever you want. Having a good nutrition meal plan, things like that. And so even though there's a little bit of a give and take of questioning the competition, or them having these smoke machines at an MC during the games, day in, day out, it's more about what they're doing behind the scenes. And I do believe that the resources are there. If the kids were to buy in, that they will improve.
You mentioned Mount Verde and IMG sort of as comparisons. That was actually going to be my next question, how it compared to those. How much do you think sort of this entire process, just even beyond the Twins, with some of the other guys who can hear their names called in this draft and next, how much will the next few months tell us about just how successful this program has been at developing talent so far?
The sample size is small, I think that the first year they didn't have quite as much talent as they do this year with the Thompson twins. I mean, the Thompson twins are, in my opinion, elite prospects. And I think the one thing that I've seen over the course period of these 2 years, and talking with their staff about this as well, is that the kids that are proactive and are willing and able to and sort of make the decision day in day out to utilize everything that it's worth, those are the guys that are improving. And so the Thompson twins are a perfect example of that. They have steadily gotten better since they stepped foot, on the campus there. And especially their bodies. I mean, I was there a couple of weeks ago and had a chance to watch the first day, watch them work out and interview them. And then, just got to spend some time with them. I mean, they're really maturing physically, and I don't think that's all natural. I think they're getting it done in the weight room. I think they're learning how to take care of their bodies and eat well. And so Tyler Smith's another guy I got a chance to spend some time with, and he's developed this reputation as a worker, and as a result, he's gotten a lot better too. And so those are just a few examples, but. Yeah, if the kids go there and they have their heads on straight, everything's there for them to get better.
Before we go to a short break, Matt, and then talk deep dive into Amen and Ausar, is there another name? You just brought up a name right there. Is there another name that the fan bases and NBA draft people or NBA draft fans should know? Like, who's the next guy or next couple guys, whether it's this draft or 2024, maybe it's 2025? Is there a name that really is the next guy that's going to carry the flag for the OTE program?
There's a number of guys. I think Alex Sarr is an interesting guy. He's the younger brother of Olivier Sarr. 7-footer, very skilled. I still like to see him, gain some weight. But Tyler Smith, like I mentioned, I'm pretty excited about those two guys. I could probably keep going on and on. They've got so many players in that building. Bryson Tiller's a younger guy that I'm keeping my eye on. I mean, he's a couple years out. But yeah, there's a lot of talent in the Overtime Elite program right now.
I love it. And when we come back from this short break, we're going to dive into the two biggest talents in the Overtime Elite program. I know Pistons fans are excited to hear about Amen and Ausar Thompson. We'll talk about those with Matt after this short break.
All right, we are back with segment 2, and we're going to dive right into two of the two almost guaranteed lottery picks at this point, Amen and Ausar. Let's start with Amen, who, like I mentioned earlier, he's widely been mocked, somewhere between 4, 5 in that range. And you kind of mentioned just how elite these two are as prospects earlier, but what stands out about Amen's game to you, and where is he sort of in your tier list right now?
There's so much about Amen that to like. I mean, he's very well rounded, and I think the big hole in his game is his outside shooting. I mean, that's no secret. I mean, everybody's able to identify that pretty quickly. However, I don't think it's entirely broken. I don't think it's a lost cause. And having gotten to know him personally, I mentioned he's a worker. He's really developed all the way around, and he has improved as a shooter slowly but surely. And so I think he'll get there. As far as his strengths go, I mean, this is a 6'7" Olympic level athlete that essentially does a little bit of everything else. If you want him to be the point guard, he could do that. If you want to play the 2, the 3, and then on the defensive end, he has a chance of being elite. Locking people up and defending multiple positions, and I'm just very, very excited about Amen. And everybody asked me about comps, right? And when I'm looking at the high side of what Amen can do if he really gets everything clicking, and we're talking about elite names, at least that pop up in my mind. I mean, I'm thinking Scottie Pippen, Grant Hill. He's got a little bit of LeBron to him. He's not quite as big, but he's a big on ball do-it-all elite athlete. And so to me, the upside is there. I mean, is he going to develop to be one of these, all-time greats? I don't know. Time will tell. I mean, that's a lot to put on an 18-year-old's plate. But I am excited about the potential for sure.
So you do see him as being, I guess if we're talking about the top guys, I think people have Victor in his own tier, and then, somewhat Scoop, Brendan Miller. Then for you, I guess, where does he fall in that hierarchy?
Victor, I think, is clear cut the player that's everybody's got pencil number one. It seems like Scoot's number two, which I fall in the same boat. I think Amen's right there. I think Scoot, Amen, Brandon Miller, Ausar is probably not too far off either. I think that's sort of the next grouping. But I am on the same page of probably Victor, Scoot, and then either Brandon or Amen being that third guy.
Can you talk about where he is as an athlete? Because I've heard people say, like, he walks in and he is a 1%, like literally 1% athlete, top 5 in the NBA. Because I think, Matt, the reason I want to clarify this, I think sometimes we say elite athletes, and Pistons fans are going to be like, well, Hamidou Diallo's an elite athlete. I think we're talking about a different level of athlete with Amen Thompson, or at the very least, he's able to use his athleticism in a better way that makes it more practical. Am I off there?
I think you're spot on. And he's one of the best athletes I've ever seen. And, and one thing too, is it's not like he's just fast or he jumps high or just does one thing or another. He's a well-rounded. I mean, I mentioned before, he's an Olympic level athlete. I mean, this kid could be a track star. He could be a football player. He can do whatever he wants. I mean, this guy is elite, and he's getting to be very strong. I think when he becomes like a grown man, say 25 years old, this guy's going to be like an animal. Multi-positional athlete, handles it, and just a total stud all the way around. And that's where kind of comes into play. I mentioned LeBron, which is it fair to put any name with LeBron? Probably not. But a 6'7" kid. That's a do-it-all guy. That's one of the best athletes we've ever seen. I mean, that's how LeBron was, and he just got a lot better at everything, right? And so, but yeah, long story short, elite athlete.
You mentioned the jump shot being workable, and that seems to be the thing that people are most worried about. Let's say he doesn't become a good jump shooter. Sort of how much would that lower his ceiling, and how much does him beating his potential rely on him at least having some semblance of a workable jump shot?
I don't know if he's ever going to get to the point where he's a pure shooter. Let's say on the low side, say he doesn't progress as much as you'd hope. I still think he's going to be a really good player. I mean, he does so much, on the ball. So I mean, I think he's good enough to be an on-ball creator. Which the way the NBA is played right now, I do think there's room for having at least one guy that doesn't necessarily have to stretch the floor, especially if the ball's in his hands. And then obviously defensively, I mean, I think he's got a chance of being, one of the premier perimeter defenders. And so, yeah, I mean, it's certainly a swing skill. And I do think there's direct correlation with his overall success in his outside shooting. But I don't think it's necessarily a make or break it type thing.
Let's talk some Pistons specific here, Matt. So how does Amen Thompson fit with Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey? And we don't even have to go to who the other bigs on the court would be. I know there's a lot of jokes going around right now. They're trying to play these two bigs. Regardless of who the two bigs are, Matt, whether it's Duren, whether it's Stu, whether it's whoever, what do you think about the trio of a Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, and Amen Thompson? I
mean, in a lot of ways, it really excites me. I mean, that it is a very versatile group, very dynamic. I mean, each one of them. And I think all of them kind of fall in the same category of, okay, how much do they progress over the next couple of years as outside shooters? Because, I mean, if in a world where they all progress, I mean, that could be an elite trio. I mean, good luck matching them with those three guys, right? And I think defensively, there'd be a lot of versatility too. Cade's probably the least athletic of the three. Amen and Jaden Ivey, I mean, they could mix and match like who they're guarding. It's pretty interesting. And then offensively, I mean, it's three guys that could play on and off the ball, especially if a man can get it to where he's hitting shots at a little bit of a higher rate. But just potentially very, very dynamic and versatile group. So
you don't see a lot of fit issues with those three. Just is that just the overall playmaking flurry that they have and just overall versatility meshes pretty well? Does it concern you that Ivy, he shot the ball better than I think a lot of people would have expected this year, but all three of those guys have yet to prove that they can be plus shooters over the course of an entire season.
I think the NBA game is really evolved and changed in recent years, where there's not as much of a demand for having a traditional true point guard or floor general. I mean, a lot of teams are liking having multiple ball handlers and creators. And so I think in a world where you're getting these kids to shoot it at least enough, I think with the open floor and the game being played faster, I mean, I could see a world where they all can coexist and thrive. But again, I mean, outside shooting is so important with all three of these kids' development.
You kind of touched on it a little bit there, Matt, but I know a lot of Pistons fans are going to say, well, Cade needs the ball in his hands. Jaden needs the ball in his hands. Doesn't Amen need the ball in his hands to be successful? Well, how would you kind of answer that in terms of, one, does Amen have to be the primary creator? I think no, based off kind of how you've pitched him as this versatile player. And is there enough opportunities where all three of those guys can play with the ball in their hands at times?
I think there's room for, I mean, I don't think, teams necessarily need to or should play, let's say how Dallas is using Luka or Milwaukee uses Giannis. I mean, the usage rate's probably too high. They're putting too much pressure on these individual players, and it might be great for their individual stats, but at the end of the day, this is about wins and losses, right? So I think having three guys that are versatile, I do think it could work. And I don't think, I mean, especially with Amen and Ivy, they are both so incredibly athletic. I think playing with other dynamic players, now all of a sudden you're able to utilize their finishing abilities. I mean, Amen Thompson, I mean, this guy can jump out of the gym, and he's got, what all the kids call, he's got all the jelly and all that stuff too, right? So like, I mean, putting him in spots where he can be a scorer, even though he's I think naturally wired to be a facilitator. I mean, he's got the potential of being a high level scorer as well, just because of his athleticism and ability to finish around the rim.
How good is the passing, Matt? Because I watch what I have watched of him. I like it. I think he is a good passer. I think he reads the floor. What do you think about the passing, the creation in general? Because I like it. I think it can be really good. And similar to Jaden Ivey, he doesn't even have to be this extremely high-level read guy. He's going to put so much pressure on the rim, draw so much defense. All he has to do is be able to make the easy read, which is what we've seen Jaden Ivey do in his rookie season.
No, 100%. I mean, that's Jaden Ivey in a nutshell right there, whereas I don't think he's a natural passer. Doesn't have like a knack of delivering the ball, real easily to his teammates, but he's also an elite athlete, and he gets to his spots, draws the defense in, just makes simple reads like you mentioned. I think comparing the two, Amen is much further ahead than Jaden in that regard of being just sort of like a natural point guard as far as delivering on passes and playmaking. I think it's, it comes to him naturally, and I'm assuming we're going to talk about his brother here in a minute, and that's probably the big separator between him and his brother as well, is that Amen's just, wired more like a point guard and just as a natural facilitator.
And we can get to Ausar now because he's pretty highly regarded. You're pretty high on him as well. Seeing as more of a wing than an on-ball guy like Amen is, I guess for you, is that the key differentiator between them, and what stands out about Ausar as a prospect individually?
They're identical twin brothers. So, I mean, they have all pretty similar physical tools, right? I mean, I think that I've heard some people try to talk about like there's this big difference between Amen and Ausar athletically. Like, I'm not seeing that. I mean, I'm in Atlanta. I've met them 2 or 3 times now. I can't even tell them the difference when they're walking around and stuff. I mean, these guys are the same size. I mean, Ausar might be slightly bigger and more physical, but they both have the potential of being elite perimeter defenders, have similar types, natural skill sets. I think a lot of the big difference for me, and I actually asked them this in their interview, and the big difference for me is that Amen is wired to be more of a facilitator, how he approaches the game, and Ausar is a little bit more of a wing scorer, get to the rim and finish. Just as from a comp standpoint, the comp I came up with Ausar, and I've heard somebody else say this too, is he's a little bit in the Andrew Wiggins mold. I do think he's got better ball skills, and a little bit more versatility, but he's how he differs from Amen is he plays a little bit more like Andrew as far as being more of a scorer and slasher and finisher and defender, which, I mean, to me, both types of players fit the game well if they can hit outside shots at a decent rate, right? So it's a lot of the same stuff I was saying about Amen. The same areas for development, it all fits Ausar too, even though I think they're different style of players.
Having seen him in person, and we'll speak obviously specifically to Ausar now, how much do you believe in the shot? And also, Matt, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I've talked to you about this. Can you also speak to the type of kids these guys are, the type of prospects they are in terms of workers and coachable and competitors and all of that stuff? So can you kind of merge those together? One, how much do you believe in Ausar's shot, just where it's at right now? And how much of that maybe belief is because you got to sit down and talk with them and see how they are wired?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you and I have talked about this quite a bit. I feel like I'm somewhat unique in this draft space because, all my various involvement, we didn't even touch on half the stuff that I'm doing, but I do get access and I get to know a lot of these players directly, get to know their parents, and having some of this intel and insider information, if you will, does kind of lead, influence my evaluations of players quite a bit. Because just like anything, not even just basketball, but somebody that's got their head on straight, that does X, Y, and Z to improve, usually that's the recipe for success. And having gotten to know Amen and Ausar and learned about them, their personalities and their background, every indication is that these kids will improve all the way around. They seem very serious about mastering their craft. No nonsense type kids, like high character, and they both seem like mentally tough kids as well. And so I don't see any reason why they can't develop into being at least respectable shooters. And so again, they check off pretty much all of the other boxes. And so if that's the only issue that there is, and my confidence level is high enough to think that they can get over the hump, that's sort of why I have them so high.
How would Ausar fit with this Pistons team, just given that he is more of the finishing type compared to Amen, who's more of the on ball, make decisions with the ball type?
They both could fit just about anywhere because their versatility. Defensively, but coaches are going to love them right off the bat because they play hard, they're coachable, and they'll defend everybody. Again, I think so much is going to determine how for each of them how well they're hitting shots from outside. And so I think with Cade and Ivy, Ausar naturally falls into more of that wing spot, wing defender, finisher, rather than being sort of splitting, on ball creation type opportunities. And not that Ausar can't do it at all. It's just not quite as much as Amen. But a lot of the same strengths that Amen brings to the table. I think he'd provide a lot of versatility to a Pistons group.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, Matt, so don't hate me for this, but I got to ask. Pistons are on the clock at 3, and you're the GM, or you're giving Troy Weaver, you're in his ear. Brandon Miller, Amen Thompson, Ausar Thompson.
Well, I will say this, that would be a great problem to have, right? It's those, to me, those are all three really high level players. The top part of this draft, I'm really, really excited about. And I got to be completely honest with you, I'm not trying to deflect or dodge the question here. I'm not quite sure. I'm a little torn on Amen and Brandon Miller. Brandon Miller is a guy I'm really high on as well. Very different than Amen. I think I'm more than willing to listen to the debate that Brandon Miller should be the third pick, especially on the Pistons team, because of his style of play with outside shooting, and it'd be easy to pencil him in with two on-ball creators with Cade and Ivy. Not that Brandon Miller can't create off the dribble as well. I don't know if you watched the game yesterday. They're playing him at point guard essentially. But yeah, I think where he hangs his hat is as a shooter and an NBA style shooter. They're running him off screens. They're running like NBA type sets for him. Movement shooting. Again, very good problem to have if you're Troy Weaver.
And Matt, I did want to bounce this off you as well. With Amen and Ausar being 20 years old, and overtime elite, they're sort of on the top end of age in that group. Does that factor into your evaluation as well? And if not, I guess to what extent?
I look at age to a certain extent. I think people in recent years get caught up in it a little bit too much. I don't let it sway me dramatically either way. At the end of the day, an 18-year-old is a young player. A 20-year-old still a young player. There's still a lot of room for growth, and for either direction, still a young player that hasn't been in an NBA weight program or had NBA coaching day in, day out. And so I think there's still significant upside for a guy that's in the draft that's 20, 21 years old. Obviously, we got, guys, what's the one guy at Memphis who's 26 years old? That's a different way. DeAndre Williams. We're talking about a 20-year-old and a 25-year-old. Okay, that's something that I think does make an impact. But if we're talking about just a year or two, I still see these as very, very young players.
And to that point, Brandon Miller is actually 20 years old as well. And I'm not saying again, I don't think we should critique these guys because of it, but often we talk about the Thompson twins being 20, but we don't also bring up that Brandon Miller is 20 as well. I have one question. I know we got to get you out of here, Matt. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're obviously super busy, man. We've talked about the Pistons and just in general, we had you on before the trade deadline. They obviously don't move Bojan Bogdanovic, and they do end up essentially trading Saddiq Bey for James Wiseman. Can we just get your quick thoughts on that? And then, of course, we're going to have you back on before we get to the offseason and break that all down and do that again. But your quick thoughts on those two moves and not move, I guess, there at the trade deadline for the Pistons.
Yeah, that was interesting. I mean, you guys are keeping a much better pulse on the Pistons than I am, obviously. But it seemed like there was rumors about them possibly moving on from Bay for a while. Which I think part of that is them having this pending upcoming high lottery pick, where this is a draft filled with a lot of talented players that are all wings, right? I mean, we go down the list of different guys. Even if they were to slip, I mean, the guys they're probably going to be looking at are big wings. Anthony Black or Cam Whitmore. And so I think they're probably looking at adding one of these players that we've mentioned and adding another young big that's got significant upside. I mean, obviously things have not gone well so far for him, but I mean, how old's Wiseman? 21 years old. I mean, he is a young guy that at one point was penciled in as the likely number one pick in that draft, and so I like it. I mean, I think it's a calculated risk, but if they feel confident they can get it out of Wiseman, I mean, he if it clicks. I mean, he fits what they're doing, and you add this high lottery pick. I really like what the Pistons have in place, and I think the last time I was on this show, we kind of talked about the Pistons timeline. And if I were Troy personally, I wouldn't be in a rush. I mean, I think this needs to be a program where they're looking at about development over these next couple of years. And if they could start winning games at a high rate, hey, that's just a cherry on top.
All right, Matt, man, we got to get you out of here. We appreciate it so much. Before you go, please let everybody know what you're doing, where they can find you, the podcast, the writing, all of that. And we got to make sure that we talk about when Draft Digest Pro is going to go live.
Yeah, sure. So first off, you can find me on social media, mainly Twitter and Instagram with the same username, Matt Babcock 11. The Matt Babcock Show, which is produced by Tidal League. You can find that on whatever platform you use to get your podcast. And then Draft Digest Pro. We're launching it April 10th. It's going to be part of Draft Digest, which is a channel for Sports Illustrated and the Fan Nation Network. Really looking forward to getting that going. So yeah, stay tuned. We got the pre-draft right around the corner here, Bryce.
Yep, I know. I'm excited. Matt, thank you again. And everybody listening, stay with us. We are going to come back. Me and Omari are going to come back for segment 3, and we're going to talk about Eugene Omoruyi. We may talk some RJ Hampton and the Pistons in general.
All right, we're back with segment 3. And before we get into some RJ Hampton and Eugene Omoruyi a little bit later in the segment, I believe we have a new review, Bryce. So actually, before the review, somebody on Twitter had a funny observation, so I'll let you lead off with that one.
This is one of the better Twitter comments where we've been added before, Omar, which I love when someone adds us on Twitter. And I was shocked that your mom was the only one that called me out about the gyro thing from last episode. We could loop that into all of this food conversation. And we will, like Omari said, we will talk some real Piston stuff. And again, thank you to Matt Babcock. This was from Jeffrey Cameron, and he tweeted at me and Omari, "My 12-year-old was putting chips on his sandwich at lunch today. And when asked about it, he said, quote, Omari does it. I figured you'd probably want to know how impactful your pod truly is. Changing lives one episode at a time, Omari."
Changing lives. That 12-year-old's life will never be the same. It's funny because I'm not when I push chips on my sandwich a lot, but I advocated for it, and now that is part of my brand and my identity. So I'll own it. I'll wear it. I'm the chips and sandwich guy. I haven't done it in a while, but I'll still be the champion. And anything that gives me a win on this podcast, I will take anyway. So Thank you so much for sharing that story. I use it to tease Bryce, as I usually do.
No, I love it, man. I was so excited whenever I saw that. And I was like, man, we got 12-year-olds listening to the podcast. We have grown men listening to I just love it. We're for all ages, Omari. I truly feel like that. We've said like one cuss word on the podcast, and it was the title of a TV show, and we had to make sure everybody knew it wasn't even the actual words. So we're family friendly over here at the Pistons Pulse, brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. And we did have a new rating and review, 5-star on Apple. Again, send those in. We're getting close, Omari. We're close to 200 ratings on Spotify. We're at like 179. So if you haven't left a rating over there, please do. Let's hit that 200 mark. But this was from Rusty 2 Iron. He says, great podcast. I like a lot of basketball podcasts, but I especially enjoy this one because they discuss how the game is played, positioning, plays, etc. In addition to talking about who's on the team and who might be joining in the future. Plus, it's focused on my favorite team, Detroit basketball.
Yeah, I always love when we get reviews, and to hit 200 before the end of the season would be fantastic. I want to put a deadline on the amount of love you all show us. I'm just putting it out there. That would be awesome. So if you like the show, have any feedback you want to give us, feel free. I mean, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on everything else. So please give us that feedback. We love it. It keeps us going. And we always like talking to you all and giving people shout outs as well. That's always fun.
Absolutely. Amari, we got another story. I didn't even know this happened on Saturday with you and Wes. And Wes, this is awesome. I'm so excited. So I have no idea where this story is going to go or what happened or what went on. So let the listeners know how this all went down.
Yeah, Wes and his dad, Mike, were at Saturday's game against the Pacers. And we went and grabbed some food before the game. So I got to meet Wes's dad, Mike. Awesome guy. I'm a big fan of Mike. And he had on his Pistons Post t-shirt. I had on my hoodie.
Let's go.
He had, some Pistons Post synergy going. I actually got to get my parents some Pistons merch. So I saw his t-shirt. I was like, oh, I should probably get on that. They are pizza guys. Wes reached out a couple days before, like, where we're going to go eat. And I was like, we should get something Detroit centric. And we ended up going to Grandma Bob's in Corktown for pizza. And I think Wes was a little bit of a skeptic going in. He's got some Chicago ties, and and I think everybody is always tied to the pizza that they grew up eating, right? Or at least the pizza that they experienced more of growing up. Wes, he said the pizza was really good. We got 2 mediums. We got a spicy pepperoni with hot honey, which was my recommendation because I'm a hot honey on pizza guy. Just bought some the other week, actually. Hot honey is amazing. Mike's hot honey. And then we got some Supreme. And it was good. It was good. They both agreed that it was great pizza. They agreed that the crust was the best part because Detroit style is all about the bread, whereas most pizzas are about the toppings. But Detroit style bread is top tier. It's buttery, crispy. It's got the burned edges, like it's the star of the show. And it was good. We just sat down and talked shop for a little bit. And we just need more synergy. Like, we need more parents on the phone. Like, I'd love for you guys to meet my parents. Like, Bryce, maybe we can touch on my parents when you come to Detroit in a few weeks. But we gotta make this a thing. We gotta keep this going.
I love it. Like, this is truly showing the listeners how much this has become like friendships and lifelong friends, no matter where the podcast goes, where it takes us. This is the coolest part of all of it. I will say, hot honey on pizza, you just ruined a 12-year-old's pizza life for the rest of their life, because that is ridiculous. And we're not going to debate it. All I'm going to say, Anjanette, Kirk, I don't know why Omari's on the Pistons beat. He should be on the food beat in Detroit or what. I don't know what the Free Press has to offer with that. But Omari, let's talk some Detroit Pistons basketball. Eugene Omoruyi, man, I feel like people really like this guy. He's shown some stuff. What have been your first impressions of the kid? And for the record, he just got his second 10-day.
Yeah, we're recording this Monday afternoon. And, the team made it official today. He signed his first one on March 3rd. So exactly 10 days after. He's been good. I think anytime you have a guy that comes into the season this late, like even, a player coming in at the trade down, it's just so late. You never really know what to expect. Like, quickly they'll acclimate themselves or, just coaching staff figuring out how to utilize them correctly. You're still going through that with James Wiseman to an extent. But he came in and he plays a very simple brand of basketball. He just comes in, he brings energy, he defends, he hustles. He's trying to charge, the offensive rebounding. He's reached double figures, like the scoring has been there. Just as a Swiss Army knife type of guy, I think he's really filled that that road with pride, and that's given his Pistons team a little more fight and edge, which, like they've dealt with injuries all season. So, it's kind of tough. But for him to come in, and I think just his energy, his defense really stands out. And, Dwayne's complimenting him, James Wiseman's complimenting him, he's winning the respect of his teammates. It's a really cool story. And, and just basketball-wise, I'm curious to hear what you've thought of him so far, Bryce. But I think just for a guy coming in on a 10-day and doesn't know what's going on, just has to go out and play, he's done exactly what you would want to see.
No, I liked him. Like, I'm intrigued because what I like Omari is he's shot a couple threes, right? Like, he's like 38% from three. So it's not like a ton. It's not a super high volume as you look at the games, like 1 out of 3, 1 out of 2. So I'm not saying it's like, oh my gosh, this guy's a shooter. But if he was just making hustle plays and just trying to take charges and didn't have any real skill level, it would make me a little more skeptical. I've seen enough so far. And we always have to give that. Like, that was barely – the Pacers set out all their dudes on Saturday as well. We're getting into the point of the season where even the other teams aren't playing their guys. So we also have to consider level of competition. But just watching him play, I feel like he moves and has the skill. Like, I'm interested in him as a 4-man. That would be a nice changeup. Now, am I going to sit here and tell you I want him to be the starting 4-man? Like, no, that's crazy. I don't even think I would want him to be the second unit 4-man Omari. But when you talk about rounding out this roster with 11th, 12th, 13th guys, I'm intrigued. And if he likes being in here and he wants to be a part of it, obviously the contract is going to be super easy. Maybe he can take up one of the two-way spots. I'm not exactly sure how all of that works, if he would be eligible. But, a two-way spot, maybe he's, the 15th guy. Like, I'm interested. That's what I'll say. I'm definitely interested.
Yeah, he's definitely been intriguing. I've been intrigued by the shot making, like not just making things happen on the offensive glass, but he's gotten a couple of threes to fall, and he had a coast-to-coast layup in transition Saturday night, and he's just showing a little bit more juice just as a scorer than I expected coming. Not that I had any expectations. I can't say with any player on like a 10-day, more often than not, you probably haven't seen them play much, if at all, before they get to the team. So I really didn't have that much of a framework for what he could and couldn't do before he came to the Pistons. But he didn't really shoot the three very well in the G League, and he was overall pretty efficient. But I think just how he's been able to consistently make an impact in that area, just come in and to defend and rebound what he's doing, like that's been great. But a lot of times those guys struggle to kind of find their shots. I thought RJ kind of had that issue early. We'll talk about him just finding the bottom of the net. But he had 15 points against the Wizards. He had 9 points a game after that. I think he had 11 against the Wizards Saturday night. He's averaging like 18 minutes a game. Like, this is pretty good scoring for the minutes he's been playing, and it's become pretty consistent in his last 3 games. I think that's kind of surprised me.
And it's all super small volume, Omari. So this, we may change our minds by next week, right? Like we're about to do that with RJ Hampton, I would imagine, because last week we were like, we don't know. Data changes, Omari. People's opinion changes. That's how it works. Right now we have a 5 game, 18 minutes a night data for Eugene Omoruyi. The 3-point shot has looked decent. The free throw percentage in a small sample has been really good, which is like, okay, maybe there's some real shooting touch here. I like some of the defensive possessions. We've seen him switch out on guys, stay in front. Obviously he's going to play hard because he's on a 10-day. He's trying to earn the next 10 days. So it's like, what does he do outside of those things? And some of that stuff has looked good. So right now with the data we have, Omari, I'm like, I want to see him play on this team the rest of the season. I want to see him get 25 minutes here in 3 weeks when I'm out there for those 2 games and see him in person and see where it goes from there.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's always fun when you have a guy that comes in, late into the season, and this is the quietest part of the year, for a team that's, the Pistons have 15 wins, obviously not a whole lot to play for, but you bring a player in who has something to prove, and they're just doing a lot of smart stuff somebody else is doing, right? Like, Hami was doing a lot of that stuff, and that endeared him, to Pistons fans, and now Eugene has kind of stepped into that. Like, he's not the same player as Hami, just kind of coming in and making those hustle plays. It's great. It brings energy. It brings a little bit of excitement. Like you said, small sample size, so it's tough to say exactly what he would do over a larger sample size. I'm a fan of his game, and I'll say this to put him down at all. But I saw people saying, like, I've seen 2 people in my mentions say this guy has some Draymond Green, and I'm just like, let's wait and see a little bit longer, right? somebody else was like, oh yeah, they need to go ahead and ink him to a 3 or 4 year deal. And it just shows just how much this can liven up a team this late in the season. And absolutely, like I would like to see. I mean, I'm sure the Pistons at this point, he's done so much. He's probably earned the chance to come back. Join summer league roster, training camp, whatever. Like, let's just see what he has. You always have those guys who are, maybe on the fringe of making the roster, but they have something to prove, and there may be a little bit more to his game. Like, why not see if he can sustain it over a longer period of time? He's shown enough, I think, in the last 2 weeks that you're intrigued by what he could go from here.
Yeah, and we had this question asked to us on Twitter this morning was, does he make Hami expendable? One, I don't think it's 1-to-1, but two, him and Hami are kind of in, obviously Hami is much more proven, but to me, like with Hami, it's if Hami will come back on the right contract and accept his role and what I believe his role should be, which is like, again, 11th, 12th man. Like, these are the guys I would love to see be players 11 through 15, Omari. Like, these are the type of guys where I think you got to have a veteran or two, but I would love to see a Hamidou Diallo, a Eugene Omoruyi. And then the next guy we're going to talk about, RJ Hampton has started to show enough as well. It's like, okay, maybe you don't want him in the rotation, but whenever somebody's hurt, when somebody needs a rest, these are the guys that can come in and fill those roles. And so I think obviously Hami has proven that throughout the entire year. Unfortunately, I would guess we probably don't see him again this season, but Omoruyi's shown it. And then RJ Hampton. And again, since the last time we recorded, Hampton has played really well. He's played 4 games. He had a 5-steal game, and he scored in double digits 2 of those games, I believe, and 8 points in 2 of the others, and started to knock down some threes. So the data changed a little bit. The sample size grew, and he's finally starting to show a little bit.
No doubt. I definitely see Eugene and Hami in similar roles, and I think Hami has shown a lot more. I mean, we've been watching him for the last 2 seasons, so he's spent a much longer span of time to show what he could do. But to me, they do occupy pretty similar roles. And I guess if you're the Pistons, you feel like Omoruyi's shown enough to, carry him into the main roster next season. Maybe there is a decision to make there because Eugene, I think, is a little bit bigger. He's probably got a little bit more utility on defense. But Hami, I mean, he's just been so efficient this year, and just what he's been able to do as a rebounder at his size, and just the spark plug. I think that's a really hard job to bring that type of energy every night, and Hami's done it. So we don't need to pit those guys against each other quite yet, but I think it is an intriguing thought process, which skill set of those two do you value a little bit more.
What do you think about RJ Hampton, Omari, and his play over the last week, I guess, since the last time we talked about him, where essentially we were like, we don't know. We haven't seen a whole lot.
Yeah, I think he's been a lot better. I think what is interesting is I don't know if I really know what type of player he is. Like, he's hit some threes here and there. I don't think he's moved the ball particularly well, but he has hit some key shots for him down the stretch. He gives you some size in that backcourt. He's a plus athlete. He hasn't really had any real moments of where that athleticism has popped either. So I still feel like I'm getting a feel for where he is as a player, but he's definitely made more of an impact in the scoring column over his last few games. And after a pretty slow start, we are starting to see some more signs of life.
Yeah, that's a good point. I still don't know who he is either. Like you talk about Hami, it's like energy, athleticism. That's what he does. Isaiah Livers, knock down threes and play, really good team defense. Like, you can go through a lot of these guys and you know exactly who they are. And with RJ Hampton, even though he has played better, so I'm not trying to take away from how he's played, but if you said, who is RJ Hampton? We kind of alluded to this on the last episode. I don't know who he is. He had that 5-steal game, but I don't think he's had a steal since. So, it looked like for a second, okay, he's going to be this defensive disruptor. Is he a high-level athlete guy? Well, we haven't seen those explosive plays. So I think there's still a little bit of, even though he shot the ball well, are you going to say RJ Hampton's a floor spacing, 3-point shooter? I don't know that either of us believe that. So I think there's still a little bit of figuring out, like, who is he, and therefore what role does he actually fill for your team?
Yeah, like, he's got 2 assists and 1 turnover in his last 3 games, and he's played between 15 to 20 minutes in each of those. Not a huge sample size, but, for a guy who's probably more on ball than off ball, you would hope to see a little bit more playmaking, and that just hasn't really been there. I would wager he's probably got about the same amount of assists and turnovers since he's been here, or maybe a few more just because of that cold start. So still very much figuring things out. One thing I will say is that he has 4 free throw attempts in each of his last 3 games. Then he also had 2 games prior to that. And not playing that many minutes, right? He's playing like 17, 18 minutes a night. So that is notable. He can get to the rim, and if you're talking about this stuff that sends him in bursts, you kind of see it in how he's able to get to the rim a little bit. But, especially with Jaden Ivey out, it kind of clears a path for him to really show what he could do. And, recording this before Monday's game, so maybe, by Tuesday morning, he would have gone off like 20 and 10 or something, and this will age poorly. But just want to see him be more aggressive. He's got to defer to other guys and try to find his own role. But with the Pistons being as battered as they are right now, you have 7 rotation guys who are not playing right now. If I'm RJ, I'm like, what? Let me just go out and show what I can do, right? Take 10 shots, throw some passes, just flex out a little bit. You've been here for a few weeks now. Just kind of spread out and show what you can do. I think he tried to fall in, and at this point, probably wouldn't hurt to stand out a little bit more.
This is the time to do that, right? To be a little bit selfish and try to take, because Cade ain't out there, Jaden ain't out there. None of those dudes are out there. Boyan's not out there. Burks isn't out there, as to your point. This is the time. It's okay if guys want to take over a little bit. And we'll end on this one, Omari, because like you said, we are recording this before the game on Monday, so I know you got to get to LCA. But a guy that has absolutely done that, Omari, especially over the last 4 games, is Isaiah Livers. He tied his career high and then beat his career high last game on Saturday versus the Pacers. His last 4 games, field goal attempts of 12, 12, 9, and 20, 3-point attempts of 8, 9, 3, and 10. Isaiah Livers is doing what you just said. He's saying, hey, these dudes aren't there. I'm going to operate in ball screens. I'm going to shoot in the mid-range. I'm going to take whatever 3-pointers I want. I don't know that this is his ultimate role. It is kind of cool to see him spread his wings a little bit and show a little bit more of an all-around game.
Isaiah Livers says, you mentioned his shot attempts being higher, not just taking 20 on Saturday, which I could comfortably say is a career high. I don't even need to look that up. He has been a little bit more aggressive. He's been getting to the rim on cuts, even taking it in the stuff a little bit more. We've seen him flash his mid-range a little bit more. And I like his game. I thought he had a rough start on Saturday. And he shot 35% overall, 7 for 20, but it really wasn't as bad as it looked. He's taking shots he doesn't normally take, trying to lift a team that's missing most of his key scorers. But I like his game a lot. I like his two-way potential. And I think going forward with him, especially when the Pistons get more playmaking back next season with, Cade Cunningham, obviously, I really do think he's a guy that could have a pretty big leap next season because he just plays the game the right way. He's really shown off some good shot making over the last week. And he's got all the tools to be the ideal 3-and-D wing. I really like his game.
Yeah, I like his game too. I was a little bit down as the season went on, but here maybe he'll finish off on a strong note. That'll lead into a big offseason. And then next year, where I do think he has real potential to be in the rotation. I don't know about starting lineup, but in the rotation. Omari, that's going to do it for us. Again, we want to thank Matt Babcock. The Matt Babcock Show, brought to you by Tidal League, wherever you listen to podcasts, Cerebro Sports. And then make sure here in about a month over at Draft Digest Pro, he'll be dropping his big board, doing all sorts of big things over there. Omari, have fun at the game tonight. Eat some pizza with, hot honey. Why don't you throw some bacon on there, maybe some chips. I don't know, whatever you got to do to make it good. It's always a great time, my man. Take it away.
Absolutely. I actually think bacon is a bad topping on pizza, but that is a discussion for another day.
You absolutely would. Of course you do.
I actually talked to Wes and Mike about this on Saturday, and they both agreed that it is overpowering. So just the West. A lot of Omari West synergy today. I'll just say that. And
which explains why you always win sheet or champ.
No,
that was an admission of guilt and proves the conspiracy.
No, there's no conspiracy. I would never do that. I'll go ahead and close this out on that note. Big thanks to Robert Chan, our audio producer. Extra special shout out to Wes today. We'll talk to you all next week.